right, I'm going to do a quick rant on verticalization amongst the foundation model providers. So the official numbers, there's been this debate since GPT-3, GPT 3.5 came out, which is that is silicon intelligence a commodity? It's at a race to zero. These foundation model providers have no moat, and you should be focusing on other things. Or are they a differentiated good that is very special, and you need to be at the cutting edge, and they will have infinite pricing power, and the model providers will be able to blast all the app providers away, take all the margins, win the whole market, destroy big tech, etc. And so we're going to look at both of those arguments real quick. The first is the argument, which maybe is the harder one to make, which is that they are a differentiated and specialized good. And I think the easiest way to look at this is that the world has somewhere between 10 and 30 million software engineers today. The US specifically has, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 1.9 million software engineers earning an average of 132K a year, and this is growing. And the argument is that these models are incredibly helpful for coding. You can make this argument for other areas of the information economy, but I'll just go ahead and make it for coding because it's clear that it has the most value here. It's pretty easy to say that these make you somewhere between, or every engineer, or at least every passionate engineer, somewhere between 2 and 5x times more productive. And it's of course like the time spent on, coding up your little thing is reduced dramatically. You don't have to do any boilerplate anymore. Looking at docs is easier. Understanding code base is easier. But it's also just that it ignites this ferocious passion for what you're doing. Before, when you're working on side projects, even 3 years ago or something, you'd have this project that you wanted to do, and then you would take like a 5-day detour on one of your dependencies, C++ not building on your machine, and you'd be reading through Stack Overflow and Reddit and learning all of this completely unrelated stuff to your like image recognition project or whatever. And now that doesn't happen. You just don't get blocked anymore ever. And that means that you can focus with full attention on the thing in front of you, the thing that you're trying to get done, the software you're trying to create that's valuable. So let's say it makes you 2 to 5x more productive, and let's say that applies to every engineer. It's like pretty clear that your willingness to pay for these things is gigantic, and particularly your employer's willingness to pay, the person with the bank account, is gigantic. And so let's say that's about 25% of your salary a year. And let's say that we're just going to apply it to US devs. So there's I don't know if this will show up in here. 9 million. 123 times 0.25 times $132,000. Okay, so that's $62 billion a year of willingness to pay for this stuff for just coding with some pretty conservative assumptions. And this is sort of where we're at today. So that's per dev, you're willing to pay $33,000 a year on average across the entirety of the US economy. Today, if you're trying really, really, really hard, it's very hard to, it's almost impossible to spend that per dev. Like even if you are constantly, you don't write a single line of code and you're writing hundreds of thousands of lines of code a month, like your max spend is on sort of like a 4.1 or an 0.3 or a 4.5 on some big context thing like Klein or Claude Code or Codex or something like that. Cursor is a little bit more gentle on these, but it's still really, really hard to spend your willingness to pay $33,000 a year. And so the argument that these base model, or an argument you might make that if these are differentiated goods, is that if this stuff is so valuable to you, it makes you so much more productive, and you have the ability to, and you're looking at like a field of interns that you could hire, and you don't have the issue where you're getting outcompeted by more exciting places to work like Google Brain or Jane Street or Citadel or whatever. You don't have that issue. You can hire whoever you want. You can hire from the top of the market, or you can hire cheaper people, cheaper silicon intelligence from the bottom of the market. You're always going to pick the stuff at the top of the market because it's specialized, it's so much better, it's a multiplier effect on your productivity. And so you're looking at sort of what's the max you can spend, and it's really hard currently to spend close to your willingness to pay. So then this whole area here, if you believe in the specialty thesis and you're a foundation model provider, this is what you want to do. Can you make these models sufficiently better, create sufficiently more value at the frontier than your next competitor that you can take all the way up to people's willingness to pay? And you can kind of see this in the pricing of these models. O3 made this, so no promises that it's correct. But you have your 4.1, sort of like your normal day-to-day daily driver model. It's at $2 per million input tokens up to O3, which is at $10 per million input tokens, and then 4.5, which of course they're pricing to try to get people not to use and just check out, but it's $75 per input token. And probably O3 is better at coding anyway, even though it's slower. And then, you have your Google 2.5 Pro model, you have your Opus versus your Sonnet model at $15 per million tokens and $3 per million tokens. But basically the argument, if you believed in this differentiated good or specialized good thesis, is that you, as the foundation model provider, want to be ahead of your competitors because people have almost infinite willing to pay compared to what they're currently paying, and you would like to absorb as much of that as possible, even if it means creating these absurd clusters for inference. Okay, and then the other argument on the other end of the spectrum is that it's a commodity good, that it's like RAM in the 90s. And so you see in the 90s, there's this is a log scale, so this is even more pronounced. There's this very sharp decline in the prices. We had Claude make a little diagram of this, the price per megabyte of RAM over time, and you can see 95 was sort of this inflection point where both there became much more RAM in the machines and the price of RAM decreased aggressively. Again, this is log scale over here. And the notable thing is that this JDEC standard came out, which commodified RAM. It made it so you could plug and play any RAM into any system. The Windows operating system became, like the software layer, the operating system layer became very agnostic to the stuff under it, which meant that you could drag and you could swap in pieces very easily. And that really destroyed the pricing power of the hardware providers. And so, there's Mac OS, there's Windows 95, and then there was the JVM as well, which the whole premise was that you can write your software in one language and then you can run it anywhere and you don't really have to care about hardware. And that really drove the pricing down to zero. And the corollary there, of course, would be these applications that are really agnostic to model provider. You can switch between Gemini 2.5 Pro to 4.1 to O3 to Claude 4 Opus, and then, maybe your DeepSeeks and your self-hosted and all that stuff as well. And the concern would be that if you can do that so easily, it's very hard to maintain pricing power, and it's a race to zero. And so, if you believed in that future, what you would want to do is you'd want to verticalize. You'd want to get as close to the person that has the willingness to pay as humanly possible. You would want to maybe buy the leading coding editor, or the second one. You would want to release apps that are very interesting to people. You would take so concretely, ChatGPT now has deep research in it. It has the canvas mode. It has artifacts where it can run Python. It has image generation, various other things. They have launched Codex recently, which has both a CLI version and an integrated version. This is sort of like their equivalent of the cursor agent mode or the Klein agent mode. They've released it open source, which is very cool, good for them. You might buy a hardware startup, sort of like Limitless, that would be doing devices to put this AI into the world, like this. If you're Anthropic, you might also really care about your Claude interface. You might do artifacts, stuff like that, and you might release your own coding agent. And so the argument basically, if you believe that this stuff might be a commodity in the future, that this specialty differentiated good thesis is fake news, or at least plausibly fake news, you would go towards verticalizing. You would try to buy the apps, you would try to own the user relationship, you would think about things like login with OpenAI, you would try to own all the pricing power, and then most notably what's kind of new here and different than the hardware commoditization in the 90s is that there's also this data flywheel. Every time somebody uses a completion in Cursor, you have like a subtle RLHF signal that was a good completion, and then you can train the model on it. And this is true for everything at the application layer. So commodity or differentiated good, I don't know, but the actors that are working on it are clearly making some plays towards verticalization.